I think the one thing that is so unique when I was looking at your background, going from finance, even in the Marines, it sounded like, which I thought was really cool. Love to learn more about that. But there's so much like that's unique about restaurant operations, right? Mm-hmm. There's so much that restaurant operators know that no one else knows. And like we said before we jumped on here, a lot of it's like gate kept behind jargon, or it's just not easily translated to, let's say, someone who hasn't grown up in restaurants. When you came in and started working with the brand now, what was that kind of first few months looking like for you? Like, how did you kind of immerse yourself in that expertise of the operator to try and blend not only what you've learned in your career, but like give yourself that crash course on hospitality?
You know, it's funny that you asked this question today, because I was meeting with one-on-one with two of my team members this morning, and we actually recounted the exact story. I think it's so serendipitous that this conversation came up, because they were like, how did you actually come into this business? And so I remember one of my very first days on the job, and while you can have a plethora of knowledge in finance or operations from a business perspective or technologies, at the end of the day, they're all kind of similar, the way that which you navigate them. I will never forget my first day here. The prior employee had been terminated, and it was a payroll day for two restaurants that not a single person even knew how to pull a payroll file. And that was really my first foray into the disconnect between the actual restaurant operations and what happened in the back office. Yeah. And that was the problem that I identified day one, and the problem that I was going to tirelessly work to try to correct and bridge between how do I teach these folks how to think like a business operator, but at the same time, the only way that that was going to happen is if I absorbed what it meant to be a restaurant operator. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, our VP of Ops, you know, who I was working with most directly, that was his consistent, like, chief repeating officer dialogue to me is, you have to listen, you have to have empathy, you have to understand their operations. And so when I came in, and he kept spelling that out, because what I was finding is what I was directing wasn't either being received, interpreted, or understood. You know, I was trying to build all of these processes that I knew would eventually help them just oversee their four walls and take some of this administrative function and just the things that, you know, frankly, I think I mentioned this in a panel recently, restaurant operators are inherently scrappy. They will bootstrap, duct tape, and you just saw these layers and layers and layers of manual processes. And I'm like, my goodness, I can't imagine doing the same thing every single day that can be automated like that. So my first few months was a lot of listening, a lot of understanding, and then slowly showing them the why behind how different things could be, or how when they, for example, I think we just talked about, you know, invoices coming in through us, you're watching them code these individually, or they're having this 18-year-old assistant manager do it, and they don't understand the actual impact of what they're inputting. And so that was the realization for me is, wow, there's really a disconnect from how to develop these people to understand the business. And if they could just understand the business, they will have a whole new level of management and ownership of their four walls. Yeah. So that's really what the first 6 months looked like. It was a lot of unlearning what I had known about business, because, you know, you generally have a staff of precision in those when you're looking at a hierarchy or a support center. And I didn't have that. I didn't have any resources. I had myself and two restaurant operators. Yeah. And then you have these new locations, and you're developing other ones, and you're just recognizing all of the layers that go into the business. Like it's so people forward. There's a guest point. There's a team point. You have your managers, and then you have all of this, you know, back end from HR to finance to R&M, all of these things that are being handled. There's a lot to absorb. I don't think people truly have empathy to what it means to be in the hospitality business or in the restaurant business. It is very different than any other business, because most businesses, everything is back office, and you're selling some product front facing, and we're doing the same, but you almost have two clients. You have your team and you have your guest. Yes.
So I like how you put that too. I want to get to something, but what I find so unique about restaurants, I think, is where the drastic empathy is lacking. it's not unusual to see a restaurant with $20-30 million of annual revenue run by someone with a high school degree and two other people in the office.
It's incredible.
It's unbelievable. If you are a technology company with $20-30 million in revenue, you have every tech product you could ever ask for. You have probably top MBAs to choose from.
Correct.
You could work with just about anyone and it's all dialed in.
Correct.
Meanwhile, you have restaurant operators who are able to seemingly overcome any challenge with very little formal training, yet are able to do it day in and day out.
Yes.
What I've learned from that is kind of goes back to what you were saying, which is the why. If you can teach someone why you're doing something, you had these such incredible self-starters who are the restaurant industry, someone that I consider myself a part of. But understanding the why is where the empathy really drills in, right? For both of you. So walk me through how you teach the why. Walk you through those four walls, why this is so important. How do you get in and deliver that message? Knowing one, you don't come from the restaurant industry, and two, they don't come from your side of the tracks either.
Yeah, that's a great question. It took a lot of trust building on really on my behalf. And so what I had to understand very early on was I wasn't going to get the deliverables I wanted probably in the time frame that I wanted, because they had never been in as structured of an environment that maybe I came from, or where I was executing consistently and had action items that I had to execute consistently every single day. I mean, not that they don't, but different in the business side of it. Yeah. So here they are, you're asking them to look at your food costs, reduce. Well, what does that mean to them? They didn't know what that meant. They're trying all the ways that they know how to. And so what it took was a lot of listening on my behalf. And also when they needed something from me, I needed to execute on it with precision and as quickly as possible and to be responsive. Because I knew I was the outlier in the business. I didn't come from their business, and I had to build their trust that I knew what I was doing and that I was going to help impact and affect them. And so what that did was it built trust that they knew that the data I would give them was correct and they could use it. They knew that if they asked me to do something, if there was an emergency, if they needed me to jump in for something, if they needed a resource, and if I gave it to them quickly, again, trust building. They knew that they could rely on me. They knew that what I was giving them was correct and factual, not laden with mistakes and errors, not confusing. And so that was the first step, is how do I make sure that they trust me? And then the other thing is, and this took a while, and we talked about it shortly, I never talked to them like they were restaurant operators. So sure, maybe I'm bringing in new jargon that they haven't heard of, or maybe I'm sharing something with them that's outside of what they would think their scope of work is, or their pay grade per se. But it was an opportunity for them to learn something new. So when we were talking high level finance, I remember initially they weren't even seeing a full P&L. Well, how do you drive the business if you can't even see the economics of your four walls and you don't understand the impact, right? There's a lot of restaurant operators that don't want to show them, occupancy costs. Well, why not? They need to drive your top line so they understand the percentage impact. So teaching them the whole business view, showing them how they stand within the ranking of the entire brand, what this person's doing better. And now, obviously it's been 5 years that I've been with the brand, and we have so much more data, so much more tech, so much more analytics. Yeah. When I'm talking to them about all of our strategies, we're talking to them like they have a seat at the table, because they do. Yeah. And so that's, for me, it's always the why behind it, because I can't just give them a directive. This is not the military. It's not just an order and discipline and obedience. It's, here's what we're doing. You think there's some complexity to it. Great. Give us feedback on that. Let's test it. But here's why we're doing that. And then most importantly, behind the why, you have to follow up with the results so that they know the efficacy. And when you can do that, that's kind of the full circle, I think. The full circle win is that they're seeing it from concept to completion. It's ideation all the way through, and they're learning something from development. They're learning the way something's ideated. They're learning how something is piloted. They're understanding how that they impact that pilot, and then they're impacting the deliverable, and then they're seeing the success of it. and then you can reward them for the success of that work. And so for me, that's been the big picture. That's been the only way to really grow, is for them to understand all the whys behind all of the mechanisms, because I have operators who have been there since I've been here. So 2 units to now 11, soon to be 20. They've seen a lot of change.
Yeah.
And to get somebody behind all of that change, you have to explain why you're doing it. They have to understand the impact, and you have to take their feedback too.
Yeah. I think there's such freedom in structure, which I think is a bit of a funny way of putting it. But I had a leader once tell me that, like, if you can build a process where you see it start to completion, like there's a structure to this. Now you have the freedom to use that process and do other things, start to completion. Yes. Right. And like seeing how something follows through is so important.
And it's repeatable.
Completely.
You can scale it.
Yeah. Like, oh, this worked this time. I want to create whatever change. You learn how to brainstorm. You learn how to, build out a plan. And then, all right, we can just use the same process. We go here, we check in at this point, we do a review, whatever it might be. Now I have a core belief, but I don't want to, lead the witness with this, but what do you think is going to be the most unique advantage that hospitality will gain with something like AI? Understanding the complexities of experience being held within individuals with non-traditional backgrounds, with non-traditional education, whatever it might be. So what do you think AI presents as the most unique opportunity for restaurants?
Yeah. So I think everybody in the world has a different explanation or definition of hospitality.
Yeah.
And mine is, hospitality is anticipating the need. And it doesn't have to apply it's just anticipation of the need. You are anticipating the need before the question or the need comes to you. And so I think that's what AI has the opportunity to deliver, is that restaurants will be able to use it in a variety of ways. You can utilize AI to anticipate the behavior of guests, because you will have all of that information. And thus you can give them a deliverable thinking, we know the behavior of this guest. We've watched them over, let's say, a 6-month period of time. We know what they consume. We know the pattern at which they consume. We know the time of day that they consume it. We know if they ever come in more frequently, if there's a discount. And so you can present to them offerings to continue to guide their journey and keep them a lifetime guest for yourself. So I think that's the easy answer to that. You can use AI too. But you can also use it in a variety of other ways, right? You're looking at the behaviors across regions. I think about it from, we're a franchisor. So I'm looking at it that way, is I can utilize this to open restaurants. I can utilize this in a way that I am looking at various inputs from my data sets, right? I can look at sales volume. I can look at check average. I can look at product mix. I can look at psychographic data, drive time data, and put all of that in and have it look at it and say, here's where your best performing units are, and here are their similarities. And here's how they also dissimilar for ones that maybe aren't in that tier. And here are locations that you should potentially market to because they are there. So you're anticipating future markets, so future guest needs, future employment. I think you can look at it from marketing. You're looking at ingesting all of you can see who's interacting with your guests on a daily basis. And you can fill in around that so that you don't have to keep marketing and allocating resources to guests that you've already captured. And then I'm sure, at some point there's going to be a lot of resources, I think, into the workforce part in. I obviously haven't solved that problem, but I think that's where restaurants, and if you're a software developer out there, here you go, write those down. There's a lot of needs in the workforce management side, I think, of this business and attracting talent. So is there a way for the AI, if you have, for example, an employee like team member engagement program, are you able to look at profiles? We used to talk about the old Myers-Briggs, and here's personality tests for franchisee avatars or leadership. How do you start taking all of those core personalities and utilizing that to identify talent or attract talent? So I think there's so many mechanisms to AI, and then fundamentally, let's just talk training. I mean, there's so many resources now where you can input your training information, have tools at now more than ever, people can have information at their fingertips in seconds. You think about 20 years ago, right? There used to be the wonder theory. People used to sit back and go, I wonder X. That doesn't exist anymore. If people have a question, they're able to ask the question. And if you can do that within your own organization, you're constantly providing the why to people.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a great way of putting it, especially like just how quick an answer can come.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like projections and training and just kind of like future setting basically is a big piece for you and how you look to implementing technology in different types of AI. Is that fair to say?
It's very fair to say. I am always future forward.
Yeah.
The team always makes fun of me a little bit because my answers are not for the now. They're for 10 steps from now. They're a year from now. They're 18 months from now, because that's the way that I have to think. And that's how I think. Yes, to your point about forecasting. And I mean, think about it. If you could go into a market and predictively know potentially what volume is, you can set up a new location for such success. So my use for AI is certainly future forward.
Yeah. It's, I think one of the coolest things that AI has done is it's democratized data. It's made it so that data isn't necessarily hidden behind a very expensive salary that you have to pay in order to capture it, or a skill set that you don't necessarily have, or frankly, let's just time, right? Like you said it best, right? The amount of time it takes to get an answer now is so quick. When I think about a restaurateur, let's say of a 1 to 2 unit location, who is 18 hours a day, barely seeing their kids, at what point do you go in and figure out how to get your P&L from hopefully every 4 weeks, and it's not, to every week? Like, because those things matter.
Yes.
When I think about AI, I think of like this massive knowledge pool that restaurant operators have that is atypical and hard to empathize with if you're not a part of it. And I see that all the time with technology companies trying to build technology for restaurants, but they don't understand the operators. So it doesn't really click. No. And putting it into a system where, hey, I am the operator and I know the outcome that I'm looking to achieve, being the architect of my future. And using it to kind of work through that. And maybe there is somebody on the other side at the company, someone like, for myself, let's say, who can help bring those expertise out. Like, what are we trying to achieve here? If an industry average profit margin is like 5%, like we can create massive change off of small little tweaks within the back office, let's say, or where we choose to put a new location or how we're training an employee. It's, I think empathy to me is the biggest advent. We'll have the most empathetic product rollouts, sales process, whatever it might be, with the use of AI, because ideally it'll be built around the outcomes that restaurants really need in a very customized sense.
Yeah, I think, to your point, I think you bring up something really good, really important about data. There is no shortage of data points within this business. Zero. I mean, if you think about it, it probably has some of the largest data points of any. Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
And so when you think about that, though, and it goes back to what we first talked about, most restaurant groups are not housing tech CEOs or folks that have had substantial engineering backgrounds or are data analysts, right? A lot of them come up through a homegrown system. They were maybe, a back of house employee that now has been promoted to being, the bookkeeper or something, in the corporate structure. And that's what's unusual, to our particular, or what differentiates our business, is that we still have to operate like we are a large scale organization, and you have all these inputs. And I don't think a lot of folks operationalize it. I think right now, if I had to look at a challenge in this particular industry, the challenge is everybody is a tech company, everybody. Yeah. And everybody has a dashboard and everybody has information. But if you don't have somebody on your team that is ingesting that information, analyzing it, putting it into cause, action, solution, and then executing on that, then you're just sitting on a gold mine that you're doing absolutely nothing with. And I think a lot of brands are doing that right now. And the ones that are going to win in the next 3 to 5 years are the ones that are going to build the infrastructure to operationalize all of that data and actually put it into action in real time. Yeah. And I can say that, though, right? I'm 11 units. I'm a small brand, which, the advantage I have. So legacy brands have years and years and years of data. They have layers of leadership, though, which prevents them from acting on that data. And they have more infrastructure, more locations. I can be nimble. So I think as an emerging concept, data is my weapon for speed. And that's essentially can accelerate a lot of brand growth, but you have to figure out how to operationalize it and without making it complex to your operator.
Yeah.
That's truly the challenge.
It's got to have the structure to be simple.
Yes.
But AI is this term that it can be on everything, you know what I mean? Or technology can be for everything.
Yes.
11 units, growing a lot. You have plans to add another 10 this year, roughly?
Yes. We have 5 under construction as we speak. The other ones we're waiting on permitting planning, but 5 under construction that we'll have open in the next 6 months.
Another thing that's so unique about restaurants is like you're going to double in size in 12 months. And like that's incredible. It happens, right? Like you go to any other industry, they're gonna be like, sorry, what?
Yes.
Right? Like, so how do you budget for technology? You know, I think we've established that both of us like to look to the future and like, how do we set ourselves up for success? A lot of these things can be expensive and it can be a daunting investment. And especially when the future state of being 20 units, 21 units, you're not there yet. You know that there's going to be importance and new complexities. So how do you build the confidence to make large investments in, let's say, technology to put yourself in this opportunity to succeed when it's, hey, 12 months from now and they're all up and running, they're operational, and you have another 30 now that are coming down the pipeline?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been through kind of the iterations of growth already. You know, I remember when we were here with 2.
Yeah.
And there was 3 of us. And then we went to 6. So we tripled in growth
exactly.
in a short time with no additional infrastructure. And I think that part was different because we were company owned and you can execute differently when it's your own locations because you're managing your people. It's not impacting anybody else. You're impacting your own infrastructure, if you will. And so that was easier. But as we positioned for franchising, that's when I realized that I had to be very smart. We have to be very smart with our resources. And at the end of the day, the resources that we invest in have to make the brand grow, scale, and always, which is a franchisor's core job, this is our responsibility, is to ensure the unit economics for our franchisees. So that's how I look at it. So when technology investment, I had these conversations very early on with our founders that you need to build these layers. If you want to grow, if you really want to be this 7,500 unit brand, now is the time to build the infrastructure to allow yourself to scale that way. And so if you make always making investments in people, this is our business. But this was something I also had to train my own team on. Sometimes the investment in team is not always what you think it is. It's not always the Christmas party or the team appreciation. The investment in people is also in the resources that you can provide to them to make their job easier, to improve the quality of their work, to improve the quality of just their day-to-day work-life balance, and to improve their development as operators. I don't anticipate that all of my GMs are going to be GMs forever. I hope they continue to grow within our organization, but they can't grow if we don't develop them, if we don't give them the tools, the knowledge. So it always goes back to what's going to be a return on investment. And so some technologies, you just need to build infrastructure, right? I mean, everybody needs an accounting software. And that's costly. And so you just have to measure, well, what is going to give me the best output? What's going to give me the most accurate information? What's going to be easiest for my team to be able to execute, utilize, and review from a reporting structure? What's going to get me, what might work here at 2 units? Is this going to be the software I can use at 100 units? And that's been the approach. It's never been about consolidation. It's always been about integration. Will these systems talk? Will they scale us to 100? Because that's the North Star. And will they provide us with the data outputs that we need to move the business forward? We have gone through many RFPs. Most recently was our, order aggregation, our loyalty program. And I won't lie to you, James, it was a 2-year in the making process. Because the first step you have to do is, number one, what are your needs and what will they be over the next 2, 3, 5 years? Number 2, what is your business case? What do you want the outcome to be? Because I think that's also just a lot of problems. And that's probably the fundamental problem in our industry. And I just love to see so many more technologists coming over to the restaurant side. I think it's where they can add such value when you consider the size of the industry and market share.
Unbelievable.
Is that there's just not a lot of people out there that can help restaurants figure out what their outcome is. Restaurant operators are going to inherently say, I want to grow sales, I want to increase margins. But what does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that actually mean? Does it mean adding incremental revenue channels? Does it mean you're just growing a particular revenue channel? Does it mean reducing the size of your footprint because now you're looking at your, dine into off-prem ratio and that's shifted? Is it, margin that you're looking to impact? I don't think a lot of people are asking those questions. And I think it's where technologists can really help because they are so used to understanding and analyzing data. They don't realize that, hey, if we can just raise check average in this one area, or, maybe we need to look at our pricing strategy, that they can impact AUV pretty significantly. Or perhaps we have SKUs on our menu that actually negatively impact and, creates churn in our guests, or it's high cost or high labor. And so when you look at technology, I think you have to always look at what's going to be the return. Yes, this is going to cost us X, but if you build out the model and you build out the business case, ultimately you're going to see this is going to grow X, or this is going to reduce Y, and that's overall going to contribute to the larger impact and broader health of the business. And so that's how we look at the technology. What do we need to invest in? Because we have to scale. If we're going to be 20 units, there's certain infrastructure needs that have to take place. So that's the first point of the investment. And then what's the business? What is this, the problem that we're trying to solve? And if we can solve it, what's the return going to be?
Yeah.
And if we're going to have 2x, 3x, 25x on that, then that's something that we would want to move forward with, so long as it doesn't create layers of operational complexity.
Yeah. I think you're bang on. Like, what are the outcomes here?
Yep,
like, what is the outcome that we want? How can we get to this outcome? It's almost like the technology itself doesn't matter so long as does it get me to this outcome? Does it do it consistently? Is it going to just blow up on me one day? Does it all of a sudden, if I get to 20 units, will it not work at 30 units? Like,
correct.
What is the long-term implications of this? Is this a partner that I can grow around?
Yeah.
I think that when I look at technology from my side of things, like, there's so many unique ways in which technology can work and can help restaurants. Most of that technology, though, is not implemented correctly because the people on the technology side of things don't necessarily understand the outcome that a restaurant's looking for.
Correct.
Right? Like, we'll use credit cards as an example. We have a corporate credit card and we help restaurants automatically capture receipts and basically clean the data at point. And then there's massive time savings in the back office. But I can go to a 80 unit franchisee and be like, hey, your team is telling me that, you could save 30 hours a month here. Like, yeah, but the Amex points took my family to Mallorca on, I can't compete with that. So it's all about what kind of outcomes do you want? But the question I would have for you, obviously it seems like you have a future perspective on your circumstance in the industry that is aligned definitely with the way that I like to look about things, but not always what I see when I speak to operators. A lot of operators live in day to day, week by week, maybe.
Yes.
So when you think 2 years ahead from now, 3 years ahead from now, like, what's a technology right now that doesn't exist, but let's just talk about the outcome that you would like to see exist?
You're going to steal my software idea. No. I do think the most underserved technology in the business is actually finance. I think there are great tools out there to serve as reporting databases that can operationalize the information coming in and give you more granular P&Ls than probably the industry has seen in the last 10 years. But most small brands in particular, the ones that are just starting, they don't have resources for a CFO. They don't have resources for even a fractional CFO because you are paying for that degree. Yeah. And so what they are limited on is forecasting, cash flow, treasury management, just somebody that is, looking at the business and the health and its growth. And I think today that technology can exist through AI and through modeling technologies to provide restaurant operators with real clear understanding of where their business positioning is today, next week, next quarter, and for the, the year. That just doesn't exist in these. They try really hard, but it's not accurate. And it doesn't have all of the inputs that I think are relative to help a brand grow. I think if you asked a lot of restaurant operators today, where do you stand if the music stops? I don't know if they would know. They might know roughly from a budget that they've built or a forecasting model. But I think you know as well as I do, James, every day changes in this business. You could have snow for 3 days that just closed your restaurant. All of a sudden, you could have construction that impacts the way that guests are able to get to your restaurant, and that decreases, dine-in traffic. Or perhaps you have a new competitor move into your market. There's a variety, or maybe you had a staffing issue. All of those inputs affect the overall health of the business. And I think if software can exist out there where restaurant operators can be more in tune with that piece of their business and the finance part, that they're looking in real time at their cash flow, at their budget, and where they can grow, especially franchisors that are layering new locations, new royalties, new fees. I think that's where the greatest opportunity is today. Everything else exists, I feel, right now, and it's just being refined.
Yeah.
But I think there is truly an underserved audience and technology out there around finance, because I think most restaurant operators, this is where they are least skilled, is in financial acumen. So if you have a tool that can not only teach, but help you understand your business better and in real time without potential error because it's manually done, I think that's the winner for me, at least.
How would you use that today?
I look at it, that is going to, how I would use it. I'll tell you why or how I would use it, but let me tell you the frame of mind it comes from. I talked to somebody 2 weeks ago in San Diego at the Restaurant Finance Conference, and she asked me about budgeting. And she said, how do you use budgets? And I said, well, I make them and then I throw them out. Because at the end of the day, and she laughed and she said the same thing. She said the budget I made 2 months ago, and she was from a major legacy brand, isn't even applicable today because of the varying degrees of just change that happens in this business. So the way I look at it is, I want something that's going to tell me what's going on in my business for this year. That, number one, I can continue to show my operators. That's it. All goes back to education and the why.
Yeah.
If I have something
Empathy.
that I can build out, that I understand at a high level, but then I can use it in a way to model and show them. If I can show my team the health of the business and I can show them what the growth trajectory is, that creates motivation, opportunity, and just buy-in in so many ways, because you're educating them on that. And that's hard to give just through an Excel spreadsheet. But then if you can show them in real time, hey, but we're seeing, dine-in traffic here increase, so we're going to have a percentage. Or, hey, this GM over in this market has really been driving strong catering sales. Let's add that input in there. Or, hey, this location, we're having some construction and the parking lot's going to be closed, or the beach is going to be dredged. Trust me, these are all real things that input. What that does is it gives me a really, truly realistic picture of where the business can be in real time at all times throughout the year, that you are constantly updating and modeling. And that just makes you a sharper operator. You're not just relying on projection, you're operating in real time. Yeah. And you can grow a business with precision when you have true analytics and true data and true information at your fingertips every day. And you can make better decisions. You can make better decisions and you can make faster decisions, because again, it all comes down to speed in this industry. We're all competing for the same share of stomach. We're all competing for the same traffic right now. And value is very important to the consumer. Service is very important to the consumer. And look, there's a lot of competition density out there right now. So how do you differentiate yourself? And so all of those factors play into it. And I think you need them in your modeling. It's just not cash in and cash out anymore. There's so many drivers to this business that other businesses do not have to rely on for their growth. At least I think so.
Why do you think that doesn't exist today?
Transparently, I think what exists out there is only what we communicate as operators. And I learned this a lot from just the new suppliers that I've brought on and new vendors. I just spoke at the OLO conference. If you don't structure listening into your partners They're never going to know. They only know what their team knows or what's communicated to them. And I think in this business, and this is what's severely lacking, and what I would tell all restaurant operators, you need to give your vendors feedback because that's what's going to make this business better. The technologists only know their side. We know the operation side. And if you don't share with them the pain points, the choke points, the stress points, and the way that they severely impact the business, it'll never change. And I see that even in my own four walls here. I only know what I know. And sometimes I don't find out about things till 4 months later. And it could have been the most simplest fix that I could have corrected in a day that would have made their day and their working relationship easier. So I think a lot of it is around things don't exist in the restaurant technology stack because it's not being communicated from the operators. And that is our job, I think, as operators today, is to communicate the needs from the four walls and from the back offices all the way to these vendors to say, these are the needs. This is where the friction lives. Create me something that is frictionless.
Do you not feel like it's part of like the technology industry's responsibility to ask their clients what are the outcomes that they're trying to achieve?
It is and it's not. And I only learned that through my own. People only share what they want to share. Or you have to ask the right question. It's like AI, right? AI is only as good as the question at which you ask it. If you don't ask the right question, it's not going to give you the correct answer. And so you can't just sit in a forum and say, hey, talk to me about what your issues are. You have to, I think technologists have to be hyper specific about what they want to get feedback around. But at the same time, it is still, I think it is a symbiotic relationship. Completely. I think we have to be just as vocal with our needs in order to have real traction and continue to develop the resources. Because with AI, this could easily exist. Just how do we get it there? And the only way to do that is to communicate, this is what the needs are. And you have to be a brand willing to test it. Not everybody wants to be a guinea pig. Yeah.
Well, the ones who are first to test are going to be the ones who overachieve.
Correct.
I think AI has been scary for a long time to a lot of people, but if you can find the right partner who is truly obsessed with helping you get to your goals the way that you're obsessed to getting to your goals, it doesn't need to be daunting.
Yes.
That perfect product in your head that we've described, what would you call it?
Well, you really put me on the spot. I don't know. I'm going to have to come back to you on that one. I got to Well, I mean, truthfully, it's business intelligence. That's what it is. It's business intelligence. We hear this word is in every software. Everybody has BI.
Yeah.
Show me somebody that has great BI right now.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting.
Well, the issue.
I get a little bit of something from everybody, but there is nothing holistic. And so you as the brand have to be the holistic BI tool, in my opinion. But that's what it is. It's business intelligence.
I think the reason why a lot of the AI BI that exists in restaurant is not where it could be is because very few companies actually own the data. They're reliant on 50 different integrations that don't really work properly. They get oversold by some sales rep who's more interested in a commission than getting you to your outcomes. And one of the things that worries me is I see lots of AI companies, I see lots of restaurants implementing AI, hoping to get really great outcomes. And you know what? I think everybody at day one thinks that that's possible. But when you're relying on 30 different integrations to get you there, there's a lot of handshakes that have to happen that if they don't happen, things start to fall apart. And I think that the companies that will rise to the top are the ones that are able to do, or at least clean, capture, and consolidate the data in-house in one point, as opposed to being the connector of multiple. And then once you have that in one place, it's clean, it's actionable, then you can send it out and you can put it where it needs to go.
Yes.
That's my take. But anyways, Amanda, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, James.
Yeah, this was wonderful. I'd love now for you to, why don't you just give a little bit of an introduction of yourself at the end of our conversation? I'd love to hear.
Sure. So I'm Amanda Kahalehoe. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Vicious Biscuit. We are an 11-unit chain, a Southern brunch chain out of Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, the Charleston area. And we are currently in Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Indiana, with many more locations coming this year.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, James.
Appreciate it.